Hello everyone. Today I will talk a bit about textual data within Python, or strings as we call them. Strings are the first type of data we will talk about in this series, and they are one of the building blocks of Python as well as many other languages. For that, let me first create a new file here. Let me just name it hello.py. Make sure to follow along on your own VS Code so you're not just watching but you're actually coding and getting some good practice. So the way to create a string is simply by writing any text within between quotation marks. So for example, hello world. This on its own is a string. A string can be either created by being surrounded by single quotes or double quotes. The only thing that's important is that it needs to be the same on both ends of the string. And you might be asking yourself, what if I have a string that has a quotation mark inside of it, like it's me, Mario. How would I create this string? If I can type the quotation mark. Now, how would you create this string? You can see here that Python is thinking that this is the string. However, I want this all text to be inside of my string. The way to do that is to either change quotation marks, so I'll define the string with double quotes and use a single quote inside of it, and that can be inverted, or you could also use the escape character. So the escape character is this backslash over here, and this tells Python that this quote is actually inside of the string. Python also supports multi-line strings. So the way to create a multiple line string is to surround it in triple quotes. This is also considered one single quote, and one single string, sorry. Now we need to add some functionality to our string. Let's use the print function, and let's print out this string into our terminal. That is the only thing that the print function does. It prints whatever is inside of it into our standard place of output, which in most cases, and in yours as well, if you've just installed Visual Studio Code, it's going to be your terminal. Now, just for your own information, if your screen is looking like this, the way to open up a terminal, go here, terminal, and then new terminal. So let's run this Python file hello.py that we just created. And when I say run the file, it's the same thing as when you double click an icon on your desktop. Merely it tells your computer that it needs to add this file into the queue of processes that it runs continuously. So to do that, you go run and then run without debugging, or if you want to get familiar with the shortcut, which is very useful, I very frequently use this, Control F5. And as you can see, our string is printed. Now another way for you to run Python files is by typing the command python and the name of the file you want to run, hello.py, and the same thing happens again. So Photoshop edits pictures, Excel creates spreadsheets, and hello.py prints out the string hello world into our terminal. Another good practice is to add comments into your code. Comments will help other developers understand portions of your code, and you can think this is a good practice because very frequently code is shared between different people. So instead of them having to try and figure out what's going on, you just add a line there, and this will not get parsed when the code is running. This is simply for the users and other developers to read and understand what is going on. This is a very simple function, so everybody would understand, but this is just an example. To write a comment that is not processed, not parsed as code, you would just use the hash. You just use the hash sign and then write anything else. A shortcut, if you want to comment something out, let's say that you want to comment out this because you already have a new print line. You want to comment out this because you have a new string that you actually want to print out. The way to do that is select whatever you want to comment, hold Control K and then Control C, and that's the shortcut for Visual Studio Code. If you want to uncomment it, Control K, Control U for umbrella. And there you go. Now let's create a variable and let's store our string inside of it. Let's just name our variable anything we want. So let me name it text out of my head. Let's define the string that I want to store, hello world. Now this is what is called the assignment operator. It just means this sentence here, this line of code, means that the variable that we created, text, that we created the name, it can be anything you can choose. There are certain words that it can't be. For example, it can't be print. You can't call the variable print because print is a function and it's already code inside of VS Code, inside Python. So you can choose any other name. Let me just call this name, and you can see if you hover your mouse, Visual Studio Code will let you know that this is a variable. And this line of code here simply means that from now on, this variable contains the string hello world. This is not a logic operator of equality. This is not a question of whether or not the name variable is equal to hello world. It means that the little box that we called name, the little space in our computer's memory that we assigned this name, is now containing the string hello world. And this is what a variable does in Python. Later on, just so this is a bit less confusing, there is a way for the equality operator, and if you want to use it, it's like double equal signs. So this in the future we're going to use for logic operators to check whether something is equal to something else, but a single equal sign means this is an assignment operation that we're performing. We're assigning this value on the right to the variable name on the left. It's always good practice for you to name your variables in a very descriptive way because, again, if other people are going to read your code, it's very hard for them to try and decrypt what X and Y mean. And they're going to have to do some reverse engineering to make sense of that. So it's always good for you to try and, name something like descriptively. Now, Python reads code top to bottom. So let's say we use the same variable name, but we assign it another string. When we try to print out this variable, let's see its contents. Let's use the print function to send it to the console. Let me go Control F5 to run this. And you can see that the last definition of the variable was what was printed in our terminal. And that is because, like I said, Python reads code from top to bottom. So first it assigns text the value hello world, and then it assigns text the value Bob. So it's not, you shouldn't use the same name twice. Another way for you to use the print function is you can write a string inside of it like we did previously. Let's say hello, comma, space, and then you can use the plus sign to concatenate another string. And concatenate is just a fancy word to say glue them together. So you could put the variable text here, and it would print out hello, whatever the value of text is, Bob. So we expect it to print out hello Bob. And with Control F5, I run the code. I can see here hello Bob. If I change the value of Bob up here, let's go hello Paul. Control F5. You can see that the new string has been printed. Now let's say that I wanted to take input from the user, and let me just quickly rename this because for the sake of understanding I want to rename this variable name. Let's say that I want to get the user's name here, and then I want to display the string hello plus username. For that we can use the function called input. For the input function, the way it works, it prompts the user to type in some text, and then we can save such text inside the variable name. And for the input function to work, we need to type something that will prompt the user to write out their names. So what is your name? Let me run the code. You can see here it's prompting me to write out my name. So my name is Augusto, and it goes then print hello plus my name Augusto. So now, by now we've seen two functions, input and print, but we're focusing on strings today. You can just think of functions as what their name actually defines, which is functionality, so actions, in a simple way. Another way to do this is by using formatted strings, which is a modern feature in Python. And the way to do that is just by adding the letter F before the string and then the variable name inside curly braces like this. And you might think, well, there's not really a lot of distinction between, this and these two lines here. It doesn't seem like it's a big deal. Well, I wrote a little example here for you to see. Think about if you wanted to print out this sentence here. The song Reptilia by Strokes was released in their third album in the year 2004. I created these four variables, and one way to do it, like the first way we learned, was to write out the first bit of the string, the song, plus name, plus the second bit of a string. This is very cumbersome and it's actually prone to error. And this new, more modern way is much better for readability, correction, and it actually has some other features that I won't go over right now. But in a company environment, I would much prefer for you to try to learn to use this right out of the gate. Now let me show you a few more functions that you can use with your strings. The first one is called len, which is short for length. And what it does is it returns the amount of characters inside a string. Now let's use the variable name and let's print out whatever it is that this function len is giving us. You can see here that I'm nesting a function inside another function. And this is very common in Python and in other programming languages. So let me just run this, and again it prompts my name. It prompts for my name with the input function up here, assigns it to the name variable, and then I'm collecting the length of my name variable and printing it out here. So my name has 7 characters. Let me just change here this because I don't want to be typing all that much. So this is a string. And let me just run the code. Again, I have 16 characters. Well, if you count, it has 5 with a space, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So this is correct. It doesn't only count the characters. You might have noticed that the white space between the characters and the strings is also counted. So what this function returns is actually the amount of index numbers or of characters in total, including the spaces. Now, another example of alterations that you might want to do on your strings is to transform all characters into uppercase. And to do that, you can use the upper method. And the way to do that, you type out the name of your string that you want to convert to upper, and you need to print it out. If you just write the command, and this is going to be something that there's a good chance you're going to do now in the beginning, you're going to forget to print things, and you're going to run the code, you're going to go Control F5, and then nothing's going to be printed out here, and you're not going to go, why? Because there's also no error message. It's because you're forgetting to print out stuff. You can see here, this is a string is now all printed out to upper case. There's also the lower method, and you've guessed it. You probably guessed what it does. It converts all to, well, not if I don't change the method, lowercase. There we go. Now you might be asking yourself, before we used the length function and we wrote the name variable inside of it, whereas now we're putting the variable name outside of the lower method. And you might even have noticed that I used the word method for lower and then function for len. These two things, that are very similar, function and method. You can see VS Code cues you as to whatever that thing is. They're both related to functionality and to actions. However, a method always needs to be associated with something, whilst a function could be theoretically used on its own without a parameter. Not in the case of length, but other functions. I'll leave here a list of methods for you to try and use. Again, the lower is an example of a method, so their use is going to be like this. You're going to write out a variable dot method name. Now, if you want to play around with some of these methods and try to find out what they do, I would recommend you start with these 4 ones here on the top: capitalize, find, replace, and count. Might be that some of these methods, they will take in parameters inside of these parentheses. And let me give you a quick example. So let's use the find method. The find method will return the index of the first instance of whatever character you choose to put here. So let's say you have a string here called the variable called example, and we will store inside of it a string. I am a programmer. And let's use the find method to find the first instance of the character A inside of this. And so that we see that on the console, we gotta print this out. Control F5, and it returns index number 2. So I is 0, this empty space is 1, and then letter A is the first instance that the method is finding of this character. So just to give you, this is just to give you an example of the usage of some of these methods. Some of them are going to require something inside of this parameter, this parentheses, so I recommend you Google it. Don't forget, a quick way to Google it is just to put in the function name, put the parentheses, and then type in Python. Some reliable websites are W3 School and Stack Overflow as well, but this is probably going to be very easy for you to find and to see some examples of their usage. Now, I'll leave a few string exercises or a link for some exercises in the description of the video if you want to give it a try. Now, the last thing that I want to show you is how to slice a string. To do that, the only thing that we need to do is add square brackets at the end of our variable name or at the end of our string, and then we type in an index number. Let's print this out to see what this is doing. Let me choose number 3. Save, run without debugging, and you can see here that the letter S is printed out. That is because the T is index 0, H is index 1, I is index 2, and the S here is index 3. So another thing that we can do with string slicing, which is simply picking apart the string and selecting parts of it, is we can get a substring from it. So to do that, we would need 2 indexes here. The first index is where our substring starts. If we want to start with the first character, we start at index 0, and then if we want the letter S, let's try to select this whole world with this. We don't want index 3. We actually want to go for index 4 because the last index here is not included in whatever is returned in this substring. So let me run this with Control F5, and you can see that everything is returned. But index 4, which is actually this empty space here, is not returned. Well, it's not a great way for me to exemplify this. But let me, for example, go with index 6. Control F5, and you can see here that the capital S, which is in index 6, is not returned in whatever is printed. If you leave either one of these two indexes empty, let's say if you leave the first index number empty, it's gonna return the substring starting at the first index of this string until number 5, and then if you put in number 4 and leave the second index empty, it's going to return up until the end of the string. So it's going to start at number 4 and then it's going to go all the way up to the G. Lastly, there's also a third number you can include here in these square brackets, and the reason for that is, let's say you want to return the substring starting at the first index up until the 7th or the 6th index in this case, but you want to return you want to step over twice at a time instead of going each individual character. So let me print this out to exemplify what this does. You can see that this is not taking every character within the range of 0 to 6. It returns T, which is the index 0. It step over the age, and then it returns the I. It steps over the lowercase s, returns a space, steps over the I, returns a capital S. This is because of this number 2 that I put here. This is the stepping between returned characters. Now, another thing that you might notice is if you put in a number that is greater than the number of characters in the string, you're going to get an error in return. You can see here index error because the string index is out of range. There are not enough characters for me to return the 29th. You are also able to use negative numbers here. If you type in -1, it's going to return the last character, -2, the second last character, and so on and so forth. So let me just print this out to exemplify it. And here the second last character is the letter N. So that's it for today. Today we saw how to create strings, how to write them with quotation marks inside of them. We saw a few functions and methods including print, len, lower, upper, and lastly we saw string slicing. Don't forget to check the string exercises in the description of the video, and I will also leave a link for more information on the strings if you want to read more about them. Thank you, and until next time.